You're listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Check, check, 1, 2. Look like a little country, some rock and roll and blues. 'Cause we sure love playing for good people like you. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.
Welcome to Music Local and Sustainable, the radio show that features discussions with and the music of local musicians. I am your host, Dave Lake. Tonight we are talking with Ira Miller. You have seen Ira around probably a lot more than you realize because he's always been in the back of the band. Back of rock bands, blues bands, jazz bands, as the drummer and percussionist. But now he's up front. Welcome, Ira Miller.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah.
I've done it in like a group setting with a band, but drummer's always in the back anyway, so the lead singer's always doing all the talking.
Exactly.
You know?
You never hear the drummer.
No.
And it's probably better that way, but,
yeah.
You know, I'm...
Wait, what? Huh? Did I miss something?
I'm a rule breaker, so that's why we're doing this. Because I'm just a rule breaker. So, how did you start drumming?
I was about 13 or 14 years old. I was in junior high, and I was taking this art class. It was lots of different arts offered in one place during one day of the week, and it was the Fillmore Art Center in Washington, D.C., and it happened to be directly across the street from Duke Ellington High School for the Arts. And one semester, they offered a percussion class, and I was taking clarinet and saxophone at the time. So I signed up for the percussion class, and we got over to Duke Ellington in their huge percussion room. I mean, you look around, and it was just nothing but percussion, as it seemed like as far as the eye could see. You know, I was 13, 14 years old. I was a kid. And it was like, I felt like a kid in a candy store. And there were a few drum sets around. And of course, all the kids gravitated towards the drum sets, as did I. So we had to wait our turn, of course, and I sat down and I just kind of fell into it. It just felt comfortable. I found my home in the instrument that I was meant to play. And then just so happened, my 15th birthday, my dad asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I'm thinking to myself, does he really want to know what I want for my birthday? So I just went for it. I said, I want to get a drum set for my birthday, thinking full well that he was just going to say no and just shut it down. But surprisingly, he said yes. And so that's when I got my first drum set. And that was 30 years ago. And I haven't stopped playing ever since.
We have a full drum set sitting in the back here, but we also have some other percussion instruments surrounding you.
Yes.
What are those?
Well, I'm actually sitting on a cajon, and it's basically a box. It's an instrument that you hear a lot with flamenco music from Spain. You also hear it a lot with traditional music in South America. But the cajon has become a very popular instrument with a lot of smaller bands, folk bands, even rock bands, Latin jazz groups. And sometimes you'll find the drummer sitting on a cajon, but he'll have a combination of other percussion and drum set pieces in front of him. He'll have hi-hats, he'll have a bass drum, he'll have a snare, ride cymbal, he'll have some congas and bongos, maybe some timbales, all sorts of things. Just kind of a wide assortment of things. But it's a cool sounding instrument. So that's the cajon.
Now, how does all of that sound come out of just a box? I mean, the box, we'll describe it here, it's about a foot by a foot square, and it's about 2 feet tall?
Yeah, basically, yeah. The front head, right behind it, has 4 very thin snares, like the same kind of snares that you find underneath a snare drum. There are 4 individual snares, and it depends on the cajon and depends on the manufacturer. You can get any combination of number of snares behind the head.
Can you describe what a snare is?
It's basically a long, thin wire that's twisted all the way down. It almost looks like a strand of very, very curly hair, but it's a long, thin wire. And it's attached from the bottom to the top of the front head here, and they're evenly spaced out so that you get that sound. And depending where you hit on the head, you get a different sound. So if I put my hand, if I smack my hand right in the middle, I get more of a bass tone. Might be kind of hard to tell, but if I smack the edge of it like that, you don't really get any kind of bass tone.
When you think a drum, at least when I used to think of what a drum was, I just think of rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have some really good tone in there too.
Yeah. Tone is so cool. Especially when you're exploring the world of percussion. When I say the world of percussion, I mean percussion instruments from around the world. So I brought a couple of other drums with me.
So the cajon actually comes out of software.
Yes, it does.
What are these other drums and where do they come from?
I've got a djembe.
Looks like African.
It is. It's a West African drum. This particular drum I was fortunate enough to have made for me in Senegal. I was there in the summer of 2003. I participated in a drum and dance workshop, and it was a very unique experience for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'd never done anything like this before, traveling overseas to do any kind of musical workshop. So that was new. And in prior years, there were a lot of people who had signed up for this program, and because this was so close to after 9/11, not a lot of people were signing up for this program. So it was just another dancer and I who signed up for the program. So it's like we had private lessons for 2 weeks a piece. It was great. It was very unique in that way. It was really neat. So this is a wooden drum, and it's probably about 2.5 feet high. It's an hourglass-shaped drum. The drum head is made from cowhide, and it's secured on the drum with rope, which is also how you adjust the head. It's rope tension. I have yet to try to make the drum head tighter because it requires the strength of about 100 men to do so. So I've yet to do it. I've seen some young men actually do it on their own who have been doing this for years and years. But you can actually make the tension of the head a little tighter, making the pitch higher. If you put it out in the sun for a good, 15 minutes. So this can be a very loud drum, so you might want to adjust the volume. get pretty quiet too.
And that was absolutely fascinating because you had sounds that were almost metallic.
Yeah.
And ones that were much more rich and deep.
Mm-hmm.
And a wide range of tonal qualities and tonal pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw you once put your elbow down, apparently, and doing something.
In terms of the tonal quality, there are a number of ways you can hit the drum. And the main way you hit the drum is basically where the top of your palm, where your fingers meet your palm right here. You hit the edge of the drum to get that kind of sound. And then what I do is I kind of sort of cup my hand like this if I want to get more of a bass tone. And I just hit the center of the drum. And if I want to get sort of more of a higher pitched tone, I'll hit with sort of the middle of my fingers right here. I just have to tell you this story. We did this for 2 weeks, and the first day we're out on the beach, and I've got these two, I don't know, they're teenage boys, and they've been doing this their entire lives. And they're master drummers from the National Ballet of Senegal, based out of Dakar. That's where we were staying, in Dakar. We were about an hour into the lesson, and these guys are just smacking the life out of these drums. And there was literally blood on my hands and on the drum head. It was pretty intense. It was very painful, to say the least. But it's an intense instrument, very intense. And when you get a few of these drums together, as well as some other larger drums and dancers, it's a very intense experience. And the other thing that you were mentioning about, I was putting my elbow, I was basically applying pressure to the middle of the drum head, so that basically makes the drum head tighter, and the tighter it gets, the higher the pitch it gets. So, more pressure I apply, the higher pitch gets. I just think that's one of the coolest sounds ever.
And you have another drum.
Yeah, I have another drum. So this drum was made in Pakistan, but this is a drum that you find a lot in the Middle East. Turkey, Lebanon. This is called a doumbek. It's also referred to as a darbuka. And it's also an hourglass-shaped drum. It's a bit smaller. It's probably about half the size of the djembe. The drum head size, by the way, back to the djembe, is about 13 or 14 inches in diameter. The drum head for the doumbek here is probably about 10 inches in diameter. And you can probably hear there's something inside here. There's something going on. Right underneath the top of the drum head, there are basically tambourine jingles. And so this is probably my favorite drum because it can serve many functions in that. I think this is more of a dancing drum, so this kind of drum accompanies a lot of dancers. So,
and it's really interesting because the djembe is wood.
Yes.
But it does have some metallic sound to it, where this is metal.
Yes, it is. Yeah, this is made from, I believe this is made from aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But it has that dark, rich, almost wood sound.
It kind of does,
it's
yeah.
really weird.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, it does.
And both, even though they're very different in size, both have that really rich, low tone.
Yeah.
If you go to the middle.
Oh, yeah.
And they both have that very high sound if you go to the edges.
Yep.
Where this adds sort of a tambourine effect as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
Because, again, probably those tambourine snares that are
Exactly.
inside that
Yep.
give that tambourine sound.
Exactly.
And it looked like you were hitting it sort of on the side to
Exactly.
get that tambourine sound.
Yeah, so the way I'm actually holding the drum right now is it's basically the drum is laying on its side on my lap. And so I'm able to just bring my hand up. I'm a lefty, so I'm bringing my right hand up and smacking the side of the drum, which gives it that sound. And I'm using my left hand to get more of that bass and high pitch tone. Another cool thing about playing it in this position where it's laying on its side is that you can take your right hand, well, in my case, the right hand, and you stick it inside of the drum, and you can, as you're hitting the drum, you can sort of change the tone. See if I can execute this.
Is it glissando?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it creates that kind of effect, which I love.
Yeah, it's a great sound. It is a great sound when you're doing recording. Yeah, that's really nice.
So yeah, these are really my favorite hand drums: the cajon, the djembe, and the doumbek.
Tonight we are talking with Ira Miller. When do you get to use these? Your average rock,
You
you don't show up with these guys.
Nope, I don't. Not at all. The most exotic thing that I show up with at a rock gig is my cowbell, and that's about it. Other than the drum set, of course. I get a chance to use these in various settings. The djembe, I mostly use that if I'm in a drum circle, or if I'm working with a solo guitarist or a singer-songwriter, and it's just the two of us, and I want to bring some rhythm to the situation, whatever it may call for. Something that's very low-key, but has some body to it, and not too intrusive either. I would probably bring a djembe, because it doesn't have any snares in it or anything, and it's very easy to work with, too. With the cajon, on occasion, I will sit in with a local group, Velvet Caravan. I'll bring that to any of the Velvet Caravan shows that I'm playing and primarily use the cajon. But I'll also bring this doumbek with me too, and I'll actually put that on a stand, and I'll play that differently because it'll be standing upright as opposed to laying on its side, how I usually play it. Since I'll be playing both cajon and the doumbek at the same time, I'll kind of go back and I'm not really executing it the way I want to right now, but I usually have the doumbek on a stand. If I'm just playing doumbek, it'll be with a group that's usually playing some Eastern European or Middle Eastern music, something like that. There are a few musicians I like to play with around town that really enjoy exploring the music from those areas, from those regions, from Eastern Europe and Middle East.
Do they do that in performance?
No, not in performance. It's just kind of something that we get together and do on our own time. But I'm hoping that sometime soon, maybe sometime in the next year or so, getting a project together where it just focuses on that kind of music.
Are these other percussionists?
No, one is a pianist and also guitarist. I'm hoping to get some sort of project going with those two guys. It is yet to happen, but the gears are moving.
would be really interesting to get more musicians in town focusing on world music.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is one area here in town that's lacking.
I totally agree. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Which is a bit of a shame because, at least from my standpoint, I'm just speaking for myself, I love world music.
I totally relate to that, though. Yeah, I think there needs to be more of that world music element here. There's a place on Broughton Street, there's a restaurant that I guess it's like a hookah restaurant. Or it's got a hookah bar on the weekends at night. And the DJ spins Middle Eastern music in there. And that seems like it's probably the only exposure Savannah really has to any kind of exotic music, if you will. Yeah, there's not a ton going on here with world music, but I would really like to do something to change that. Hopefully that will happen soon.
Well, I'll tell you, you'll find me going.
Great.
For instance, I would go to that versus something else.
Right.
Because you see the something else all the time.
Right.
And so I tend to sort of focus on those things that are a little bit different, a little bit more unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's move over to the drum kit.
Okay.
And see what we got over here.
Sure.
What are the drums that we have there?
Well, I have a 4-piece jazz drum setup, which consists of a bass drum, a rack tom, which is basically, it's a small tom-tom. It's 10 inches in diameter that's mounted on top of the bass drum. And I have a floor tom, a 15-inch, and I have a snare drum. That's what it sounds like with the snares off. That's with them on. And I have got my hi-hat, my ride cymbal, and my crash. And I have my trusty cowbell.
Okay, could we go through those once more?
Once more?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got bass drum, rack tom, floor tom, snare drum, my hi-hat, my ride cymbal. It has sizzles built into them.
Sizzles?
Yeah, I have rivets that are actually drilled into the cymbal. A friend of mine helped me customize this because I wanted a sizzle cymbal.
And those are all around the edge?
Well, they're just actually, we originally had 4 on one edge, and it looks like 2 of them fell out over the years, so it's not a perfect job, but yeah. So that's my ride cymbal, and then I've got my crash cymbal.
Ride cymbal and crash cymbal.
Yes.
What's
Why?
the difference? Why? Why call them something different? They look the same to me.
Well, yeah, they are. A ride cymbal, I think, is really, it's a jazz term that came from during the heyday of jazz back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And drummers use the ride cymbal to basically ride the rhythm throughout the song. So, just as an example. So I did a little bit of embellishment with the other drums there, but the main thing you probably heard there was the ride cymbal and also this. And so what jazz drummers do, the basic thing is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how the drummers keep their tempo. And the crash cymbal is really for accenting hits throughout different parts of songs. So if I want to just accent a phrase, if I'm doing a rock beat, You can really tell better within the context of a whole band, though, when you have a bass player and guitar player or keys and a singer.
Now, is there a good example from one of the CDs that illustrates that?
Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of examples. Idiomuse is all instrumental music. I composed and arranged all these songs. There's one that does stand out, Lost in Slumber. I don't think it sounds like any of the other pieces.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. If you enjoy the programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Basic memberships begin at only $50. Additional membership levels are available. And monthly or recurring donations are welcome as well. To check out our membership rates and to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select your preferred donation level. Again, to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. You're listening to music local and sustainable, and I'm your host, Dave Lake. Tonight, we are talking with Ira Miller. So, you described this as a jazz setup.
Yeah.
And how would that differ from something you might do with, you're a member of a blues group, you do some rock and roll?
Most rock drummers or blues drummers these days probably have this kind of setup. It's sort of turned into your standard setup for pretty much all bands, is just having two toms. Back in the day when I was playing, even just like 10 years ago, I would use a 5-piece kit setup, which was basically 2 rack toms. So you would have 2 tom-toms mounted on top of the bass drum. Basically, you could do fills longer. I like to look at it as just another color for the palette, having an extra tom. In my studio, I usually have 2 mounted tom-toms on top of my bass drum, and I'll have 2 floor toms. I'll have 1 on either side of me. They'll be different sizes though. Usually a 15 and a 16, or a 14 and a 16, or a 14 and a 15. Depends on what I'm doing, really, and what I'm going for, what kind of sound I'm going for.
And why the difference in size?
You just get different tonality. The larger size means usually a deeper tone.
Broader range of tonality.
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you seek these different tonalities?
It just adds a different character to the songs and helps complement the group as well, whatever the group may be.
Is it more important for recording than it would be for performance, or really doesn't make a difference?
It's more important for me personally in a recording atmosphere, because you can really take the time to dial in the tones that you want in the studio, whereas on stage you don't really have that luxury. There's a song in particular on the Cool Beat Borscht Savannah Sessions CD where I did something totally different that I've never done before in terms of the way I played the drums and the way I treated the drums too. The track is called Boots. What I did was I placed some very small cymbals on top of the tom-toms. I put a really small splash cymbal. So we have a crash cymbal, right? They make these cymbals called splashes, and they're really small and they make a really high-pitched sound. They're like little cutesy cymbals, I like to call them, but they're effective though. They're very effective. So I ended up using a splash on the high tom. In fact, I used this very drum kit for that recording for Savannah Sessions. And I put a splash on the high tom, and I put kind of a small crash on the floor tom.
You mean physically on the head of the drum?
On the head. I put them directly on the head. The effect I got was, it was a very cool effect, and I just liked the way it sounded with the song. And also, Kevin Rose, who owns Elevated Basement Studios and who also mixed the album for us, he did some great mixing for the whole record, but just in particular for that tune, I thought it was really cool. I could try to replicate it because there are so many different sounds you can get out of the drum set. And I happen to have this splash here with me. And I don't think I used just regular drumsticks. I've got these bundle sticks, and they call them hot rods. At least that's what the company calls them. And they have kind of a different sound, less attack than your typical drumstick. So this is a regular drumstick on the snare. And these are the hot rods on the snare.
Very different sound, yeah.
Yeah, very different. So I'm hitting the high tom with the splash cymbal directly on the head. It's actually, I'm not able to really replicate the sound that I was trying to go for. Yeah, it's not really working.
So basically what you're doing is you're hitting the drum head.
Yeah.
And it makes the cymbal
vibrate. Yeah, against the head. Or sometimes, actually what I do is I hit the cymbal. The way Kevin mixed it, I think he added some reverb, maybe even a little delay, so it's sort of like the sound carries for much longer. And I don't know if I put one on the snare or not. I may have. So that's even a little bit of a different sound. So I've got the splash cymbal on top of the snare drum head, and I'm playing with the hot rod. So you can sort of hear the metallic effect of the cymbal on top of the head. that was something I'd never tried before in either live or in a studio. So that was a lot of fun to do when we were recording the record.
Do you often play with a splash cymbal?
Yes, I do.
That seems to be the size of cymbal that I've seen, for instance, when you've sat in with the Velvet Caravan.
Yes, exactly. So I usually play those because...
And you play those with your hands, too.
Well, that's the thing. I basically copied Jesse's setup when I first started playing with those guys, because he had the cajon and a cymbal stand with a couple of cymbals on it, and I saw how he was playing the cymbals, and so I just started doing the same thing. Hurts a little bit at first, but you get used to it. I mean, after a little while. But yeah, you need that thin cymbal so that you're able to really get that full sort of crash out of that little splash cymbal when you're playing it with basically your fingertips. There's no way I could really do that with this large cymbal here.
We enjoyed the story when you were in Senegal, but we don't want to reproduce that story here.
Right, exactly. We don't want blood on the room.
Exactly.
Right.
The other thing I noticed is that you have, looks like duct tape on the drum heads.
I'll use gaffer's tape and duct tape to help me essentially deaden the overtones. There are harmonic overtones. There are actual frequencies that come out of the drum heads. And sometimes when you have drums that are hanging out next to each other like a drum kit, you're going to get a lot of sympathetic frequencies from the other drums. So I try to control that. I try to tame it as much as I can by using the tape.
Okay, now I have drummer, I have percussionist, I now have drum tamer.
Yeah, drum tamer. There we go. And sometimes I'll usually have an extra towel, sort of a hand towel with me, that I will put on top of the snare drum because it's fairly resonant, right? So if I put something like this, which is about the size of a wallet, on the drum head, just on the top, sort of hanging on the side, that's a big difference from. So we've significantly deadened the tone of the head, and that can be very beneficial in certain circumstances. There are some gigs I'll play that you want that attack of the snare, and I love that sound, but I don't want this. And I'll use that a lot. Like I'll use a towel a lot when I'm sitting in with Waits and Company, and sometimes when I'm playing with Danielle Hicks as well. There are some tunes that I'll do that. I guess it really depends on the song, but that's one way to help get rid of the overtones.
Tonight we are talking with Ira Miller. Now there's also a wide variety of different sticks.
Yes. There are many different ways to play the drums, and I think that's one of the most exciting things about the drum kit is that you have 4 physical drums that you're working with, at least in this situation right now. But there are so many ways that you can approach actually playing it. You heard me play with regular sticks already. So now I'll play with the hot rods. That's what the hot rods sound like. Now nothing's really going to change with the bass drum because I'm using the same bass drum pedal, just using my foot with that. the main difference is going to be with the sticks. So those are the hot rods. We have brushes. I actually have a couple different kinds of brushes. Wire brushes, and I have plastic wire brushes as well. That sound was basically just me pressing the wire brush down on the drum head of the floor tone and moving it around in circles. Favorite drum grooves from jazz music is it's basically a 3/4 groove that I was just playing, and I always think of My Favorite Things, the John Coltrane version of that song. Just love that song. Just love it. So those are wire brushes.
And so you're more likely to use the brushes in jazz.
Yes, absolutely. Or in any kind of lighter setting, when you have some quiet instrumentation, or even if it's a rock gig and I'm playing in a place like Jazzed downtown, downstairs, it's a very intimate setting, I'll mostly play with brushes down there. Even with Danielle, like we'll do blues and funk and rock tunes, pop tunes, and I'll still play with brushes because we're trying to keep the volume down. And it's great for low volume gigs. It's great. It's fantastic. And I've got plastic wire brushes are a little different, but not too different.
Why would you select the wire brushes over the plastic brushes, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Not really sure how to answer that.
It's how you feel.
It kind of is. For me personally, it depends on exactly the kind of sound I want to get for the song. I usually have at least about a half a dozen sticks or brushes, or a combination of the two, just laying at my feet right next to me at any given time during a gig, because I will change my sticks almost every song during a show. Some people might think that's crazy, but it's just how I operate.
Now, is that true of any of the types of music that you're doing? Let's take an example of Danielle Hicks and the Resistance when you were out at the Tybee Theater. What did you have and what did you use during that gig?
I used about 3 different pairs of sticks for that gig. There is a particular drumstick company that I like to use, and they're a really small company. They're called Bopworks, and they just, the way they make their sticks, I just love the balance. I like lighter sticks. Yeah, I'll go back and forth between 2 or 3 different pairs of sticks with her, ranging from really light to a heavier stick. Now, if I'm doing a jazz gig, like that Jews and Jazz gig that I did, I pretty much just worked with 1 pair of sticks, a really light pair for jazz, and a pair of brushes. And that was pretty much all I used, I think, for that show.
Do you remember if they were the wire or the plastic brushes?
They were wire brushes.
Because the plastic brushes, to me, and maybe I'm just making this up, seem to have a more mellow tone.
They really can. Yeah, absolutely. The wire brushes, they're definitely more abrasive sounding. I feel like I can work with the plastic wire brushes a little more freely than the regular wire brushes. But I've got mallets too that I brought with me. In case nobody knows what a mallet is. Basically, it looks like a drumstick, except it has a large ball of cotton, basically, at the end. And I don't use mallets very much. You get a very dark tone out of mallets. You're getting a much softer but more definite response out of the drum. And with the cymbals, you can do a lot of really cool stuff. So I find I use the mallets a lot for very moody music, or just if I'm looking for a tribal feel for something.
jazz, I can imagine that changing tonality is a very important thing that you're doing, and the sensitivity to tonality. Is that sensitivity to tonality as important when you're doing blues, like with Danielle Hicks?
I feel like it depends on the situation, but I'm also going to say that I don't feel like I need to be as sensitive to tonality with like a blues and rock band as I would with a jazz group, where there's a lot more dynamics involved. There are less dynamics involved. I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, I still show up to all my gigs no matter what it is and make sure that my drums are in tune, or I have them tuned the way I like them.
Right, because you're much more sensitive to the varying tonalities.
Yes.
In jazz.
Yes. And in other types of music that isn't rock and blues.
What other type of music are you involved in?
So I did the Jews in Jazz concert this past March. And so I've been working with Mikveh Israel Synagogue again to put on another show in February of 2017. And we're going to do basically an adaptation of Fiddler on the Roof, a jazz adaptation of it. But I think it's going to be a little bit different in that what I'm striving for is to go for more of that folkloric Eastern European flavor, less traditional or even straight ahead bop jazz, and more on the kind of more traditional folkloric side of things, but still maintaining the sensibility of a jazz approach. So that's something that I've actually been thinking about quite a lot. I'm looking forward to developing the repertoire for that. So I'm going to be spending a lot of my time, I think, in the next several months researching folkloric music from Eastern Europe and from Western Russia as well.
It's been wonderful having you here and wonderful having you explain percussion, because, as I said earlier on, I think there really isn't a full understanding of what the percussionist drummer is doing in the back. I hope now that everybody who's listening to this show will start to listen more carefully to what the percussionist is doing, because there's some wonderful things going on back there. And we have you, Ira Miller, to thank for helping us understand that. So thank you very much for coming.
Well, you're welcome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun chatting with you. I really enjoyed it.
This has been another edition of Music Local and Sustainable, and I've been your host, Dave Lake. Save this time for another show next week.
Well, I know we ain't headed for the Hall of Fame. We're gonna give it what we got, man, that ain't no shame. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.